The lawyer's office smelled like old mahogany and desperation. I sat in the leather chair, watching him slide the papers across his desk, and I knew right then that my daughter had no idea what was coming. Neither did that husband of hers, the one with the smile that never quite reached his eyes. What I didn't know that Tuesday afternoon in Charleston was that my entire life had been carefully orchestrated toward one devastating moment. By the end of the week, I would discover just how far my own child would go for money, and I would have to make a choice that would either destroy our family or save my life. My name is Margaret. I'm 63 years old, a retired high school English teacher who spent 40 years molding young minds at Porter God School, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I knew my daughter. I thought I understood the woman I'd raised, the girl who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and call them sunshine flowers. I was wrong about a lot of things. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something about how YouTube works. The algorithm decides who gets to see the ending of this story based on one thing: engagement. If you're not subscribed, if you don't leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, YouTube assumes you're not interested and stops showing you the content. I've seen people spend hours searching for part 2 of stories they never got to finish. Don't let that be you. Subscribe right now. Comment your city below. Because what happens in the next 48 hours? You won't believe it even when I tell you. So, let me take you back to where it all started. To the moment I should have seen the truth, but chose to look away instead. It was a Thursday morning in late September when Caroline showed up at my house. The air still held that thick southern humidity that makes your clothes stick to your skin, and the jasmine outside my window was blooming its last desperate flowers before fall. I was in the kitchen making coffee, the good kind, from the French press my late husband Thomas had bought me 30 years ago, when I heard her key in the lock. "Mom?" Her voice was bright, almost musical, too bright. "Mom, where are you?" I should have known then. Caroline hadn't visited without calling first in over 2 years. Not since she married Derek and moved into that massive house in Mount Pleasant, the one with the pool and the 3-car garage that I never quite understood how they afforded on his consultant salary. "In here, sweetheart." I wiped my hands on my apron and turned to greet her. She swept into my kitchen like a summer storm, all energy and movement, and that perfume she wore. The expensive one that smelled like crushed roses and something darker underneath. Derek followed behind her, his hands in his pockets, that practiced smile on his face. "We have the most amazing news," Caroline said, grabbing both my hands. Her fingers were cold despite the heat. "Derek and I have been thinking, and we've found the perfect solution." "Solution to what?" I set down my coffee cup. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Patterson walking her terrier down the street, the same route she'd walked for 15 years. Everything looked normal. Everything looked safe. Derek stepped forward. "Mrs. Margaret, you've been living alone in this big house since Thomas passed. It's been what, 5 years now?" "6, I said quietly. 6 years this November." "Right." He exchanged a look with Caroline that I couldn't quite read. "And we know it's been hard. The maintenance, the yard work, the memories." My daughter squeezed my hands tighter. "Mom, we found a place for you. Somewhere you can live without all the stress of this house. Somewhere peaceful." Something cold settled in my stomach, but I smiled. "Oh? What kind of place?" "It's perfect," Caroline said, her eyes shining. "Small, manageable, private. And the best part? It's on our property. You'll be close to us, but you'll have your own space, your independence." I looked between them. Derek's smile hadn't wavered. Caroline's enthusiasm seemed genuine, but there was something underneath it, something urgent and sharp. "You want me to move into your property?" "Just come see it," Derek said. "We've already fixed it up for you." Come this afternoon. If you don't love it, no pressure at all. I should have said no. I should have asked more questions. But Caroline was my only child. And after Thomas died, after the endless silence of this house, after 6 years of microwaving dinners for one and talking to the cat, I wanted to believe she cared. All right, I heard myself say. I'll come look. The drive to their house took 20 minutes through Charleston's winding streets. I followed their SUV in my old Honda, the one Thomas and I had bought together, watching the neighborhoods change from historic downtown to the newer developments. They turned down a long gravel driveway I'd never noticed before, past their main house to a structure at the back of their property. It was a converted storage shed. That's what hit me first. The metal siding had been painted white, and they'd added a small porch, but underneath the cosmetic changes, it was still just a shed, maybe 20 feet by 15. Here we are, Caroline said, practically bouncing as she got out of the car. I stood in the driveway, my purse clutched against my chest. The September sun beat down on my shoulders, and somewhere in the distance, I heard a dog barking. This is your new home, Derek finished. He unlocked the door with a key from his pocket. Come on, let me show you the inside. The interior was worse than I imagined. They'd put in a narrow twin bed against one wall, covered with a cheap floral comforter that still had the store creases in it. A tiny bathroom had been crammed into one corner. I could see the toilet, sink, and shower stall, all from where I stood in the doorway. One small window, maybe 2, feet square, let in a weak stream of light. The whole space smelled like fresh paint trying to cover something older and damper underneath. See? Cozy. Caroline gestured around like she was showing me a palace. You've got everything you need right here. Bed, bathroom, even a little counter space for a microwave and coffee maker. I walked slowly into the room. My footsteps echoed on the cheap linoleum floor. When I turned back toward the door, I saw it. A metal bracket on the outside. Door frame. New, shiny. Exactly the right size for a padlock. What's that? I pointed. Derek glanced at it, then back at me. Oh, that? Just for security. This area isn't as safe as your neighborhood. We want to make sure you're protected. A lock on the outside? Mom. Caroline touched my arm, her voice dropping to something softer, more patient. The voice you'd use with a confused child. You're getting older. Sometimes you forget things. What if you wandered off in the middle of the night? What if something happened? This way, we can make sure you're safe. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. Her makeup was perfect, her nails freshly manicured, her clothes the kind of expensive casual that costs more than my monthly grocery bill. She looked like success. She looked nothing like the little girl who used to climb into bed with me during thunderstorms. Here you'll have privacy, Mom, she said, and her smile was so bright it looked like it hurt. Your own space, no more worrying about that big house. No more yard work or repairs. We'll take care of everything. I stood in that converted storage shed, surrounded by cheap furniture and fresh paint that couldn't quite mask the smell of isolation, and I understood exactly what was happening. I'd been teaching long enough to recognize a trap when I saw one. Long enough to know that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who smile while they do it. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I turned slowly, taking in every detail. The single power outlet, the window that didn't open, the door that would lock from the outside. Then I turned back to my daughter and her husband, and I gave them the performance of my life. Oh, Caroline, I said, letting my voice shake just a little. This is wonderful, so thoughtful. Her face lit up. Really? You like it? I do. I walked over and sat on the bed. The springs creaked. It's just, I'm overwhelmed. This is so generous of you both. Derek stepped forward. So you'll move in? We were thinking maybe next week? I clasped my hands in my lap and looked up at them. Actually, before I do anything that big, I need to handle something important. My will. It's outdated, still has Thomas's name all over it. I need to make a new one, and I want to make sure you two are taken care of, as my primary heirs. The change in the room was instant. Caroline and Derek both went very still, but I could see it in their eyes. That flash of triumph, of greed, of everything finally falling into place. Mom, you don't have to, Caroline started, but Derek cut her off. That's very thoughtful of you, Mrs. Margaret. Very prudent. I stood up slowly, like my bones ached. They didn't. But they didn't need to know that. I'll call my lawyer tomorrow. Set up an appointment. Once the will is updated and filed, then we can talk about moving dates. I want to make sure everything is in order first. At my age, you never know. Of course, Caroline said quickly. Whatever you need. Take your time. We walked back to the cars together. Caroline hugged me before I left, and I smelled that expensive perfume again, mixed with something else. Anticipation, maybe. Or the scent of someone who thought they'd already won. I drove home slowly, checking my rearview mirror more than once. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was racing. I'd spent 40 years teaching Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth. I knew what betrayal looked like. I knew what ambition could drive people to do. What Caroline and Derek didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that I'd already visited my lawyer. 3 weeks ago, after Caroline had casually asked about my estate plans over lunch. After she'd mentioned how expensive my house's upkeep must be. After she'd suggested, so gently, that I was getting on in years and should think about the future. I'd sat in Robert Chen's office, the same lawyer who'd handled Thomas's estate, and I'd told him everything. The odd questions, the sudden interest in my finances, the way Derek had started showing up to help with my yard work, always finding excuses to come inside, to look around. Mrs. Margaret, Robert had said, his kind eyes serious behind his glasses. I think we need to document everything, and I think we might need to involve the police. Now, pulling into my driveway, I saw Robert's car parked on the street. He got out when he saw me, along with someone else. A woman in plain clothes with a badge clipped to her belt. Mrs. Hawthorne, the woman said as I walked up. I'm Detective Lisa Anderson. Mr. Chen has filled me in on your situation. Can we talk inside? We sat in my living room, the one I'd raised Caroline in, where we'd celebrated Christmases and birthdays, where Thomas had taught her to play chess, and I told them everything. About the shed, about the lock on the outside of the door, about the way Caroline had looked at me when I mentioned the will. We've been building a case, Detective Anderson said. Your daughter and son-in-law have substantial debts. Credit cards, bad investments, a mortgage they can't afford. Your house is paid off, isn't it? Yes. Thomas made sure of that before he died. And you're the sole owner. If something happened to you, with the right will in place, they'd inherit everything. The house alone is worth over $800,000 in this market. Robert leaned forward. Margaret, with your permission, we'd like to set up a sting operation. You tell them the will is ready. We have you sign papers at my office, fake ones that they'll think make them your heirs. Then we see what they do next. I looked around my living room at the photos on the walls. Caroline at 5, missing her front teeth. At 10, in her softball uniform. At 18, graduating high school. At 25, on her wedding day, looking at Derek like he'd hung the moon. Do it, I said. Whatever you need. The next morning, I called Caroline. Sweetheart, I have good news. Robert can fit me in this afternoon for the will signing. Can you and Derek come? Of course. Her voice was breathless. What time? 2:00. at his office downtown. We met at Robert's office, in the same building where I'd signed the papers when Thomas died. Caroline wore a black dress, appropriate for a will signing, I suppose, or maybe for the funeral she was already planning in her head. Derek wore a suit. They both looked so respectable, so concerned. Robert went through the paperwork. Most of it was real. He really was updating my will. But the copy he gave them to see, the one that listed them as primary beneficiaries of my entire estate, including the house, that was pure fiction. "Everything's in order," Robert said, sliding the papers across his desk. "Mrs. Hawthorne, if you'll just sign here and here." I signed. Caroline and Derek witnessed, their signatures careful and neat. When it was done, Robert shook their hands. "Congratulations. Your mother has taken care of everything." In the parking lot, Caroline hugged me tight. "I'm so glad this is done, Mom. Now you can relax. Why don't you plan to move into your new place next weekend? We'll help you pack." "That sounds perfect, sweetheart." I drove home alone. Detective Anderson had already installed cameras in my house, just in case. Robert had copies of everything. Now all we could do was wait. I didn't have to wait long. That night at 11:30, I heard a car in my driveway. I stayed in bed, my phone recording from the nightstand, and listened to footsteps on my porch. A key turning in my lock, Caroline's key, the one I'd given her for emergencies. Voices in my hallway. Derek, "Are you sure about this?" Caroline, "The will is signed. Everything's legal now. We're just moving up the timeline." Footsteps coming toward my bedroom. I closed my eyes and kept my breathing steady, deep, pretending to sleep, pretending I didn't. Hear my own daughter planning my murder. The bedroom door opened. I could feel them standing there, looking at me in the darkness. Then Caroline's voice, barely a whisper. "The pills are in the bathroom. We'll make it look like she took too many. Old people do it all the time. She was depressed, missing Dad. Nobody will question it. And the house? The will is signed. We inherit. We can pay off the credit cards, refinance our place, finally live the way we deserve." I waited until they moved, toward the bathroom, until I heard the medicine cabinet open. Then I reached for my phone, pressed the button Detective Anderson had programmed, and waited. The sirens came fast. Blue and red lights flooded my bedroom window, shouting from the hallway, Derek swearing, Caroline crying. Not sad tears, but angry, frustrated sobs of someone whose plan had fallen apart. I got up slowly and put on my robe. When I walked into the hallway, Detective Anderson was there, reading them their rights. Caroline looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw recognition in her eyes. She knew. She understood that I'd set the trap, that I'd known all along. "Mom," she said, and her voice broke. "Mom, please." I looked at my daughter, my only child, the girl I'd loved from the moment she was born, and I felt something inside me crack and shatter like glass. "You wanted to lock me in a shed," I said quietly. "You wanted to kill me for a house." "We needed the money," she whispered. "You don't understand. We're drowning. We're losing everything. So you decided to take my everything instead?" Detective Anderson led them away. The house went quiet again. Robert stayed with me until dawn, making sure I was okay, making tea I didn't drink. When the sun came up over Charleston, painting my kitchen walls gold, he finally asked the question I'd been dreading. "What happens now, Margaret?" I looked down at my hands. Thomas's hands, Caroline's hands, the hands that had corrected thousands of essays and wiped away my daughter's tears and held my husband when he died. "Now I live," I said. I stay in my house. I tend my garden. I remember that I raised a daughter who once brought me sunshine flowers. And her? She made her choice. Now she lives with it. The trial took 6 months. I testified about everything. The shed, the lock, the night they came to my house. The jury took 4 hours to convict them both on attempted murder and fraud charges. Caroline got 8 years. Derek got 10. I visited her. Once, in the county jail before sentencing. We sat across from each other with a glass partition between us, and she looked small in her orange jumpsuit. Young, like the girl she used to be. "Why?" she asked through the phone. "Why did you set us up?" "Because you tried to trap me first," I said. "And because I loved you enough to make sure you didn't succeed. You would have had to live with killing me, Caroline. This way, maybe you get the chance to become someone better." I don't know if she understood. I don't know if she ever will. These days, I still live in my house. I had the locks changed, and I planted new jasmine under the window. Mrs. Patterson still walks her terrier every morning, and I still make coffee in Thomas's French press. Some nights, I look at the photos on my wall and try to find the moment when my daughter became someone I didn't recognize. I never can. But I also know this. I survived. Not just Caroline's betrayal, but the grief of it. The impossible weight of, loving someone who tried to destroy you. I'm 70 years old next month, and I plan to live in this house until I'm 90, watering my garden and remembering that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to let someone else decide when your story ends. Last week, I got a letter from Caroline. It's sitting on my counter, unopened. Maybe someday I'll be ready to read it. Maybe someday I'll be ready to forgive. But not today. Today I'm alive, and I'm free, and I'm choosing to let that be enough.